Alright, so today we're going to talk about Columbiformes. These are pigeons and doves, their allies. Um, and our first species is the Mauritius pink pigeon. Now, this is most commonly just called the pink pigeon. Um, the, the name Mauritius is in reference to its distribution. It is from an island called Mauritius. Um, its species name is Nisoenus mayeri, Nisoenus. And if you look at the tag sheet and you uh, look at the species name on there, you're going to see listed in the genus Columba. So it's Columba mayeri on the tag sheet. This is it's just an outdated taxonomy. It's synonymous, but it's not the correct current taxonomic understanding of this species. So Nisoenus is the correct genus. This species is vulnerable due to habitat destruction in the forests it lives in. Um, but it has in the past been listed uh, as endangered, maybe even at one time critically. I can't remember now where it was at one time, but in a worse situation than it is now. And a good thing is this species has gone through captive breeding programs that have actually been pretty successful. So this is a story of a species that was once in a much worse situation than it is now, and at least partially the reason for that is uh, aggressive captive breeding to try to reinvigorate these populations. In terms of diet, they eat uh, various parts of plants, just about any part of a plant you can think of that is an above ground part of a plant. So it's from the Mauritius Islands, and in terms of movement, they're not really migratory, but they do move around a couple islands that they're found on in search of food. And they are native to the various types of forests that you find on these islands, which include wet montane forests, dwarf climax forests, and even low canopy upland forests. So you have a variety of forest types across these islands, and pretty well if it's forested and it's on these islands, you can find the pink pigeon. The emerald dove is more appropriately called the Asian emerald dove, Chalcophaps indica. The reason I say that it's more appropriate to call it the Asian emerald dove is because there's also a species, Chalcophaps longirostris, and that is the Pacific emerald dove. And so if you just say emerald dove, you're not really distinguishing those two species. This is a species of least concern that eats seeds, fallen fruit, and invertebrates. And in one study, that was a very small study, I think there were 3 individuals in that study. About 67% of this species diet was made up of fruit. So the emerald dove is one of several species we're going to see today whose range stretches from India through places like Myanmar, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, basically peninsular Malaysia, and then throughout, in this case, basically all of Indonesia and the Philippines as well. So it's got a fairly extensive range. It is typically sedentary, though in some parts of its range it can be uh, in different seasons a migrator, but it migrates altitudinally, not latitudinally. In other words, up and down elevational gradients as opposed to north and south across the globe. And this is another species of various forests. Most of the species today are species of forests in some way, shape, or form. The white-throated ground dove, Pampusana xanthanura, is a near threatened species. Um, I should say taxonomically, this was at one point in the genus Gallicolumba, and that is no longer the case. So if you see, I think on the tag sheet, I think it says Gallicolumba, and that is not the currently accepted genus. Again, this is near threatened. This is a species that's native, as we'll see, to the Mariana Islands and Guam. Guam is where the brown tree snake problems are. If you're familiar with those, that's where the brown tree snake has basically eradicated every single species of bird from that island. Um, so its primary issue is an invasive species issue. They are actually relatively resilient to short-term loss of habitat and low levels of hunting, which they do get hunted in at low levels in the Mariana Islands. Um, so those problems aren't as pronounced as the problem of the brown tree snake. And this is particularly a problem because on some of the other islands that within the Mariana Islands that these birds are known from, there are reports that the brown tree snake has been spread to one or more of those other islands, which, if that's the case, we will have the exact same situation in Guam on those other islands. And these are mostly fruit eaters, though they eat seeds and flowers as well. So here you can see the North Mariana Islands, and I'll just point out because it might not be that obvious, but so this little island down here is an island called Yap Island. This is the North Mariana Islands here. The southern tip of that is Guam. So there's Guam, and there's worry that the brown tree snake has spread to some of the nearest islands to Guam, potentially. This is a species of various types of forests. And an interesting thing here, another invasive species pressure on this bird, is the lead tree. So the lead trees are an invasive tree species that is found on these islands that um, makes a type of forest, a lead tree forest, that they don't do well in. So even in places where you've got trees, you've got these lead trees, and it's like, oh, it's a forested area, the birds should be okay with that. They're not. The tree doesn't provide the right resources for the bird to thrive. In terms of movements, it's sedentary but nomadic for in the food situation. They'll move very far distances from roost to feeding grounds as necessary to survive. The Nicobar pigeon is one of the most, I want to say it is the most striking of all the columbiform birds we're going to look at today because it has these long feathers um, coming off of its head that are just, it looks almost bearded. It almost, honestly, it looks like something that someone made with AI. Like they don't even look real. They're a strikingly beautiful columbiform bird that is quite exotic and unique. This is Caloenus nicobarica. It is a near threatened species, and due to a variety of factors impacting this bird, habitat destruction, which is often, a big pressure issue for many species. Also, habitat disturbance, hunting, and the pet trade. This being a particularly striking bird, is a bird that people will pay money for to keep as a pet. Really, what it comes down to is this species has actually a really significantly large range, as you're going to see. And the specific pressures that are affecting its conservation status differ as you move across the range. In some places it's hunted, in some places it's captured for the pet trade, in some places there's a lot of habitat destruction. So it varies across the range. This is a species that eats fallen fruits and seeds, and also some inverts. It has an interesting interaction on some islands um, that it's found on with another pigeon called the imperial pigeon. And the imperial pigeon, when it defecates seeds out, and these guys will go and eat those seeds as well. There are two subspecies of Nicobar pigeons Um, don't confuse this here. I realize this is probably slightly confusing. Andaman and Nicobar. This is not the two. That's not the two subspecies. Um, there are two subspecies, and they are distributed across these locations. There should be a colon here to maybe make that more clear. The two subspecies are spread around Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Indonesia, the Philippines, Solomon Islands, and Palau Island, which is this island right here. And the one subspecies is just on that one island. Um, so you can see, so the Andaman Islands and Nicobar Islands are right in here. You can see this is a species of small islands that are near larger land masses, right? You don't see their distribution showing up on the larger land masses. You see them on the little islands. So they like little islands, and primarily they like little islands that are near large land masses with forest cover. And preferentially, they don't really like to be around heavy densities of people. So that's their habitat preferences. They're nomadic in nature. They move between islands for food, but they're not known to be migratory. And I should point out that their distribution really extends quite far out. I mean, this is like all of the islands of Indonesia, all the way, and the Philippines, all the way to Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands out here. That's a substantial distribution of these birds on these islands. The Mindanao bleeding heart dove, or just often called the Mindanao bleeding heart, Gallicolumba crinigera, is a vulnerable species it gets its name, of course. It should be almost instantly obvious from this photograph. They have a big red spot on their breast. That's the bleeding heart of this dove. Um, their vulnerability is caused by logging of the forest they live in, and also mining in some cases where they clear all the timber as part of the mining operation. And they are kind of poorly studied. Their diet is not known. It is thought to be similar to a closely related species called the Luzon bleeding heart, which feeds on seeds, fallen berries, and insects, as well as various other worms and other inverts. But there's not really any good study of the Mindanao bleeding heart's diet. There are three subspecies, and they are distributed throughout the Philippines. And much like the diet, the movements of this species are poorly known, but it is a lowland forest species. The the pheasant pigeon, uh, Otitophaps nobilis, it's a little complicated one to talk about conservation status, and the reason for that is because of the way IUCN and BirdLife International treats this particular species. It looks at the different subspecies that we would recognize well, I use Birds of the World as my particular authority of taxonomy. And so Birds of the World views this as a single species with four different subspecies. BirdLife International, which is what the IUCN uses, actually sees these as four different species and gives them their own, each species its own conservation status. So I've tried to break down here what IUCN has to say about these different subspecies, which it thinks of as species. So you've got two least concern pheasant pigeon subspecies, Otitophaps nobilis, and Nobilis cervicalis. They're least concern. Then you have Aruensis, which is vulnerable, and Insularis, which is critically endangered. The primary reason for these guys is habitat destruction they like hilly rainforests for the most part, and that habitat is heavily pressured across their range in New Guinea. particularly um, insularis, which is only found on one island called Ferguson Island. That the there's very little habitat available for this species to exist. Their diet is understudied, but is generally considered to be seeds and fallen fruit. So again, distribution is New Guinea, and like I was saying, they like rainforest. They like hill country, so they like rolling hills of rainforest, and they also like lower montane forest as well. And they're generally sedentary. We get to the crowned pigeons. So the crowned pigeons, this is the one place in this entire group of birds that I think you might have difficulty in distinguishing two species. The crowned pigeon, right away, so this is Gora cristata. When you look at it, you see the crown immediately. It's the great. There's two distinct things about this bird. It's the red eye on that contrasting uh, black eye mark, and then the crown. But really look at that crown and look at how the feathers fill out that crown and what the feathers look like. There is another. We're going to look at a second crowned pigeon, the Victoria crowned pigeon, here in a moment, and it very superficially, if you were to just quickly glance at the two birds, they would look the same. They are similar color, and they both have this big crown, but the crowns are different. And another easy character is that the breast feathers are a different color. Note here on this species, the western crown pigeon, the the breast is this sort of open gray color, and the maroon is restricted to um, the feathers of the wing and across the back here. It's mostly these are some covert feathers and the feathers of the scapulars and back, and not even the whole back. It's like a strap running across the bird, but it doesn't extend onto the breast. So we'll take a look at the Victoria crown pigeon in a minute, and we'll see that difference. The western crown pigeon is a vulnerable species. This species, much like uh, its closely related cousin, the Victoria crown pigeon, are collected for their plumes, unfortunately. And they're also subsistence hunted, so they're hunted for food. And because they are such a striking and beautiful pigeon, they are collected for the pet trade, the illegal trade as well. Um, their diet is fruit and insects. One of the types of insects that they really like are larval beetles or grubs. So they'll poke around in the soil and eat grubs. This is distributed throughout western New Guinea and also adjacent islands of western New Guinea. It's a sedentary species of lowland rainforests and mangrove forests. Okay, so again, I said superficially looks really, really similar. I think the easiest things to look at here are the distribution of where that sort of maroon color is and the difference in the the crown feathers. The crown feathers here are just densely tufted at the tips. Here they're more evenly tufted across the entirety of the crown. And then where the that maroon color is, again, it's out down onto the breast, as opposed to not being on the breast so much. And that there's a couple ways that you can tell these two species apart fairly easily. So this is Gora victoria. It is a near threatened species from New Guinea. Um, it's it suffers habitat loss due to logging and particularly problems with logging to create palm oil plantations. It also has all the same problems with illegal trade, subsistence hunting, and uh, plume harvesting as well, and eats fruits and seeds. This is a species of swamps, wet areas in general, sago palm forests, and lowland forests. And it's a sedentary species with two subspecies in New Guinea. All right, the jambu fruit dove, Rhynchicolus jambu, is a vulnerable species. Its conservation status and the reasons for its conservation status aren't very well studied. almost certainly, as is the case with virtually, every single species of conservation concern, habitat destruction or degradation is usually a part of um, the story, and that's almost certainly true with this bird. It likes closed canopy forests, so it's it's going to uh, it's going to suffer from some of the issues with the closed canopy forests of the places that it lives, like Sumatra and Borneo. And these guys eat figs and other fruits as well. But one thing to note for them is they really like figs. They eat a lot of figs. So again, in terms of distribution, you've got basically peninsular Malaysia, um, and then you've got Sumatra and Borneo. And like I said, they like closed canopy forests. They are partially migratory, which means there are some individuals within the overall population are known to migrate, but not all individuals. And other than that, their migration patterns and purposes for their movements aren't very well studied. Temnick's fruit dove, also known as the pink-headed fruit dove, which I is the preferred common name. I mean, look at the thing. It is a pink-headed fruit dove. Tilenopus porphyrius is a least concern species that eats figs and small berries. It is native to Sumatra, Java, and Bali. It has some specific habitats it likes are oak, laurel, and heath mountain forests, and it is found between 500 and 2200 meters. Its movements are unstudied, so we don't really know much about the movements of the pink-headed fruit dove. The beautiful fruit dove, Tilenopus pulchellus, is another least concerned species that has a highly varied diet, but it's a highly varied diet of fruit. It will eat fruit from many, many, many different trees. There are two subspecies of beautiful fruit dove in New Guinea, along with some adjacent islands off western New Guinea. And they are basically a lowland species. They get up to around 13 to 1400 meters. And their preferences for areas of very high rainfall. Their movements are very poorly studied. And I think this is the last species for Columbiformes, the tag, I think. The Mariana fruit dove, Tilenopus rosicapilla, and this one is such a good species name, rosicapilla, literally referring to its rosy cap on its head. This is a near threatened species. It is, as the name Mariana implies, it's native to the Mariana Islands, and we just learned about the brown tree snake in Guam and how it has had a big negative impact on birds in that area. Well, the same thing is true for this species. And the lead tree as well. The lead tree is a problem, and the brown tree snake is a problem for this species. And its diet is fruit. This species is essentially threatened by the exact same things that the white-throated ground dove was threatened by. Again, it's a species of the North Mariana Islands. It's extirpated from Guam because of the brown tree snake. Its movements are not studied at all, and it is primarily a species of mature native forests, but is often found in secondary growth forests, I think mostly because it has no choice in some of these places. It must utilize, to some extent, those spaces. Okay, so that is the Columbiformes tag, and if you have any questions about that, please reach out to me.